If I told you that one simple habit could help you feel steadier on your feet, think more clearly, and enjoy your mornings again after 60, would you believe me? Most people spend years searching for expensive answers, while overlooking a few humble vegetables that have been sitting in the grocery store all along. I have lived long enough to see countless health trends come and go, and I can tell you with all my heart that the greatest lessons I learned were never the loudest ones. Before you decide that growing older means giving up your independence, stay with me, because what I discovered over many decades gave me hope when I thought my best years were already behind me. I celebrated my 98th birthday in my own little house on the edge of Asheville, North Carolina. That morning, I woke up before the sun, walked into my kitchen, and prepared my own breakfast without asking anyone for help. My children still call to check on me, and I treasure every conversation, but I wanted them to know I was still capable of caring for myself. I believe many people over 60 quietly carry the same fear. They are not only afraid of illness, they are afraid of losing the simple joys of daily life, of no longer opening a jar, tending a garden, making breakfast, or walking to the mailbox without someone watching over them. I know that feeling because I carried it myself for years. I am not a doctor, and I have never pretended to understand every mystery of the human body. I am simply a woman who has watched generations grow up, who has met people from many places, and who has spent a lifetime noticing the quiet habits of those who stayed active well into their 90s. I am not here to sell you a miracle, a special supplement, or an expensive program. Researchers continue studying how food and lifestyle affect healthy aging, and many older people believe that small daily choices may help support strength and well being over time. What I want to share is far simpler than anything I ever saw advertised. It begins with three ordinary vegetables that taught me lessons far greater than I expected. The first surprised me because it reminded me of someone I loved deeply, and the memory of that person changed the way I looked at growing older forever. If you have never thought much about kale, you may be about to discover why I have never forgotten that story. After that birthday, many neighbors began asking me the same question. They wanted to know how I was still living alone, still baking my own bread, still enjoying long walks through my little garden, and still remembering the names of flowers I had planted decades earlier. Every time someone asked, I smiled because they expected me to reveal one great secret. Instead, I always found myself telling stories. Life has taught me that wisdom rarely arrives all at once. It slips quietly into your heart while you are paying attention to ordinary days. One of the people who shaped my thinking more than anyone else was my grandfather. He lived in a quiet corner of Vermont, where every spring he planted rows of vegetables behind his small wooden house. As a little girl, I never understood why he cared so much about one particular leafy green. While everyone else rushed to harvest tomatoes or sweet corn, he would gently pick fresh kale, wash it carefully, and place it on the dinner table almost every evening. I once asked him why he never grew tired of eating the same vegetable. He laughed softly and told me that nature often hides its greatest gifts inside the foods people overlook. At the time, I thought he was simply being poetic. Decades passed before I finally understood what he meant. When I reached my 70s, I noticed that my hands were changing. Simple tasks became more difficult than they had been before. Holding a heavy pan felt awkward. Sewing buttons onto a sweater took much longer than it once had. Even writing birthday cards sometimes made my fingers feel tired. My doctor explained that many changes naturally happen as we grow older, and I accepted that with respect. Still, I often wondered whether there was anything gentle and practical I could do to support my body. That was when memories of my grandfather returned as clearly as if he were standing beside me again. I decided to bring kale back into my kitchen, not because I expected a miracle, but because it reminded me of the people who had remained strong and active for so many years. Researchers continue studying the nutrients found in leafy green vegetables, and some studies suggest they may help support the body's natural defenses and overall well being as part of a balanced diet. I simply noticed that preparing those simple meals encouraged me to care for myself more consistently. Yet kale was only the beginning, because another small vegetable entered my life a few years later during one of the most difficult seasons I had ever faced, and its story surprised me even more. The first thing I noticed was not a dramatic change. In fact, if I had been searching for quick results, I might have given up before anything meaningful happened. But age has a funny way of teaching patience. When you have lived for more than 90 years, you learn that the best things often arrive quietly. I kept adding fresh kale to soups, gently cooking it with a little olive oil, or mixing it into simple meals the way my grandfather once did. Week after week, I found myself enjoying the routine as much as the food itself. Researchers continue studying the vitamins, minerals, and natural antioxidants in leafy greens, and some studies suggest they may help support the body's natural response to everyday wear and tear. I cannot tell you exactly which part made the difference for me, but I noticed that my hands no longer seemed to lose strength as quickly as before. Even my doctor smiled during one routine visit and said he was pleased that things had remained stable. That conversation stayed with me because it reminded me that caring for ourselves is often about many small choices working together rather than one magical answer. A few years later, however, another challenge appeared. I had reached my 80s, and although I still enjoyed my little home, my nights became restless. I would wake up long before sunrise, unable to settle back into sleep. My shoulders often felt stiff in the morning, and some afternoons I carried a tiredness that no cup of tea could chase away. My doctor encouraged me to pay closer attention to my meals, and that simple advice made me curious once again. Around that time, I remembered an elderly couple I had met many years earlier while visiting friends in Europe. They grew beautiful vegetables in a tiny garden behind their stone cottage. Every autumn they harvested Brussels sprouts and roasted them with olive oil until the edges turned golden and sweet. They laughed when I asked why they never became bored of eating them. The wife gently squeezed my hand and said that simple food prepared with gratitude always tasted different. Her words returned to me decades later. I began roasting Brussels sprouts in much the same way, filling my kitchen with their warm, comforting smell. Researchers continue studying the natural plant compounds found in these vegetables, and many believe they may help support the body's normal protective processes as part of a balanced diet. I cannot say the sprouts alone changed my nights, yet over the following months I found myself sleeping more peacefully and waking with a lighter heart. Little did I know that the third vegetable would touch something even more precious than sleep. It would make me look at my own memories in a completely different way. The older I became, the more I realized that growing older is not only about what happens to our bodies, it is also about the little habits we repeat every day without even thinking. I have watched friends spend a great deal of money searching for complicated answers, while quietly ignoring the simple routines that had been helping healthy older people for generations. That is why I always tell my grandchildren to pay attention to ordinary things before chasing extraordinary ones. After I found comfort in preparing kale and later welcomed Brussels sprouts into my weekly meals, I believed I had already learned life's biggest lesson. I was wrong. In my late 70s, I began noticing something that frightened me more than tired hands or restless nights. Sometimes I would pause in the middle of a sentence because the right word would not come to me. I would open a book, read a page, and suddenly realize my mind had wandered somewhere else. Nothing dramatic happened, but those small moments made me wonder whether I was slowly losing a part of myself. My doctor explained that many changes in memory and concentration can happen with age and encouraged me to stay mentally active, keep moving, and continue eating a balanced diet. I took that advice seriously. Yet I also remembered another lesson from long ago. During a visit to a small family farm, an elderly woman served me roasted beets with herbs from her garden. She smiled and told me that she had eaten beets for as long as she could remember, because they reminded her that healthy blood keeps every part of the body connected. Years later, I started preparing beets more often, sometimes roasted, sometimes added to warm salads, and sometimes blended into homemade soup. Researchers continue studying the natural nitrates and other nutrients found in beets, and some studies suggest they may help support healthy circulation, which is important for delivering oxygen throughout the body, including the brain. I cannot say that one vegetable changed everything, but over time I felt more focused while reading, enjoyed longer conversations, and found myself reaching for books again with genuine excitement. Looking back, I also noticed a mistake many people make. They expect one food to solve every problem, while forgetting that no single meal can replace a balanced lifestyle. Vegetables may help support good health, but they work best alongside restful sleep, gentle movement, meaningful friendships, and a peaceful heart. It took me many decades to understand that the greatest secret was never hidden inside one ingredient. The next lesson I learned had nothing to do with food at all, and yet it may have been the most important discovery of my entire life. When people ask me what kept me going through so many decades, they often expect me to name another vegetable or another recipe. They seem surprised when I pause before answering. By the time you reach my age, you begin to understand that food is only one thread in a much larger tapestry. I have known people who filled their tables with fresh produce, but spent every day carrying anger they could never put down. I have also known people with very ordinary meals who greeted each sunrise with gratitude and somehow seemed to glow from the inside. Throughout my life, I noticed that the happiest older people almost always shared one quiet habit. They chose peace more often than worry. That does not mean they had easy lives. Most of them buried loved ones, faced illness, struggled through hard financial times, and carried disappointments they rarely spoke about. Yet they refused to let bitterness become their permanent companion. I slowly realized that I wanted to live the same way. Every morning, before I made breakfast or watered my flowers, I began sitting by my kitchen window for a few peaceful minutes. I thanked God for another day, for the birds singing outside, for the strength to stand on my own feet, and even for the wrinkles on my hands because they reminded me of a life fully lived. It was such a small habit that no one else could see it, yet it quietly changed the way I moved through each day. Researchers continue studying how long-term stress may affect sleep, mood, and overall health. And many older people believe that reducing daily worry can help support emotional well-being. I cannot explain it with complicated words, but I know my heart felt lighter after I stopped beginning each morning with fear. Around that time, a young school teacher named Mary moved into the little house next to mine with her young son. She had recently arrived in town and was trying to balance work, motherhood, and the endless responsibilities that life sometimes places on our shoulders. I often noticed how tired she looked when she came home in the evening. One Sunday, I carried a pot of homemade vegetable soup to her front door, along with a loaf of fresh bread. I expected nothing in return. A week later, she invited me inside for tea, and before long we became dear friends. Sometimes I helped her pull weeds from the garden while her little boy laughed nearby. Those afternoons gave me far more than they gave her. They reminded me that feeling useful is one of the greatest gifts we can receive. Looking back now, I truly believe that caring for other people kept my own spirit young. And in the final part of my story, I want to tell you why I think that lesson matters even more than anything that ever appeared on my dinner plate. As I sit here today, looking out my kitchen window with a warm cup of tea in my hands, I often think about how little my daily routine has changed over the years. It is not because I fear change. It is because I finally learned that simple habits become powerful when we repeat them with love instead of pressure. If someone asked me where to begin, I would never tell them to change everything overnight. That is not how real life works, especially after 60. I would simply suggest choosing one small step that feels kind rather than overwhelming. Perhaps it is adding kale to a homemade soup once or twice a week. Perhaps it is roasting a few Brussels sprouts with a drizzle of olive oil until they become sweet and tender. Or maybe it is preparing beets in a way that brings back happy memories from childhood. Researchers continue studying how vegetables fit into healthy eating patterns, and many experts agree that a colorful variety of vegetables may help support overall health as part of a balanced lifestyle. What matters most, at least in my experience, is consistency rather than perfection. I have also learned not to eat in a hurry whenever I can avoid it. I like to sit down, take a slow breath, and truly notice the colors, the smells, and the simple blessing of having food on my table. It may sound old fashioned, but I believe our bodies appreciate calm moments just as much as nourishing meals. Gentle movement has also remained part of my days for as long as I can remember. Some mornings it is only a peaceful walk through my garden. Other days I spend time trimming flowers or sweeping the front porch. None of it feels like exercise to me. It simply feels like living. Many older people I have known stayed active not because they forced themselves through difficult routines, but because they found joyful reasons to keep moving. I also encourage myself to stay curious. I read books, write little notes to my grandchildren, learn new recipes, and enjoy long conversations with neighbors. Keeping the mind interested in life may be just as important as keeping the body moving. Most of all, I remind myself every evening that growing older is not something to fight against. It is something to welcome with wisdom, patience, and gratitude. The vegetables I shared with you have become beautiful symbols in my life, but the greatest lesson was never about food alone. In the final part of my story, I want to share the simple philosophy that has carried me through more than 9 decades, and why I still wake up each morning believing tomorrow is worth looking forward to. When I think back to the beginning of this conversation, I remember that quiet fear so many people carry after 60. It is not simply the fear of growing older, it is the fear of losing the freedom to make breakfast, water a garden, visit a friend, or wake up each morning knowing you can still care for yourself. I carried that fear too, and I want you to know that hope did not come to me through one miracle or one perfect decision. It arrived little by little, one ordinary day at a time. Kale came to remind me that caring for my body is an act of respect, not vanity. Brussels sprouts taught me that peaceful evenings and restful nights are often built through patient, consistent habits rather than quick solutions. Beets became a symbol of staying curious, keeping my mind active, and appreciating the simple joy of reading another page or sharing another conversation with someone I love. Yet if I have learned anything in more than 90 years, it is this: no vegetable, no recipe, and no healthy habit can replace a grateful heart. Every sunrise gives us another opportunity to choose kindness over resentment, peace over worry, and connection over loneliness. Those choices may not seem important a single day, but over many years they quietly shape the way we experience life. I have watched people remain remarkably active because they never stopped learning, laughing, forgiving, and helping others. I have also seen how loneliness and constant stress can steal joy, even when everything else appears to be in place. That is why I still believe one of the healthiest things we can do is to care for another person whenever we have the chance. A shared meal, a friendly phone call, a warm smile, or a few encouraging words can nourish both hearts at the same time. Researchers continue studying the connection between emotional well being, social relationships, and healthy aging, and I find comfort knowing that kindness is something every one of us can practice today. If there is one small habit you are willing to begin this week, I would truly love to hear about it. Please share it in the comments because your story may encourage someone else who needs hope today. And if these memories from my long life brought you comfort, I warmly invite you to subscribe to this channel. We will continue discovering simple, thoughtful ways to care for our bodies, protect our peace, and embrace the gift of growing older together.